Hello, welcome to my channel. Quite a number of people look at my hydrangea painting, so I thought I'd try and break it down into easy steps, and I managed to condense it to 6 simple steps to painting a hydrangea, in this case 3 hydrangeas. I'm painting on 140-pound mixed media paper. I'm using acrylic paint, titanium white, primary yellow, raw sienna, raw umber, French ultramarine blue, sap green and alizarin crimson. I'm using a 3/4 inch flat. Step 1 is to paint a background, and I'm using French ultramarine blue and titanium white, and I'll be painting that in one corner and then adding primary yellow to the right hand corner, and then the two will sort of mix in the middle and give me a green. I will also add a darker base. Usually I add green or maybe raw sienna to the bottom of the painting. It grounds things, it makes it a little more, gives it a little more depth. I'm using the flat brush in a crisscross stroke, and that sort of blends things pretty well, and if it doesn't blend it enough, I dip it into some water and try again to blend it a little more. I like my background to be quite soft, but that's really down to individual taste. I'm using a rigger or a liner brush for step 2, and I'm going to sketch in the stems and leaves and blossom of the hydrangea flower that I'm painting. When I'm painting flowers, birds, trees, anything really, I paint in odd numbers because I find that more charming to the eye, and there's probably a painting rule about that, I don't know it, but I find odd numbers more interesting to look at. I sometimes sketch in the actual leaf, but in this case I am just drawing a line to indicate where the leaf will be. I've got 3 blossom stems and 3 leaf stems. I get carried away when I'm painting. I mixed up this lovely mid-tone green, and then for some odd reason moved to putting in the blossom. But this is the stage I put in my mid-tones, and I'm putting in the flower as a solid sort of palish blue. You don't have to put in any strokes at this point. It's just an indicator of where the flower is going to be. Really, that's all it is. I'm putting in my mid-tones at this point. This is stage 3, and I usually do the flower first and then do the leaves. That's why I mixed up the green. And I'm getting paint on the canvas at this point. In this case it's 140-pound paper, but I have to cover the whole thing with paint in a mid-tone, to which I can add my highlights and my shadows. I want to say that just the 3 tonal values will get you a nice painting, a mid-tone, highlight and a shadow, but the more tonal values that you add, the more interesting your painting will look. Next is stage 4. Now I'm using a filbert brush, and I'm going to put petal shapes on my flower. The light is coming from the right. Hydrangeas have 4 petals to their little florets, but I'm not going to worry about that. I just need that brush stroke on the canvas in order to give me a sort of background for my little florets. And just making random petal shapes with a filbert brush, which is already petal shaped, is all I need at this stage. Since the light is coming from the right, I'll put all my darker colours, all my darker blues, on the left hand side of the flower, as you can see, and leave the right hand side a little lighter. This is obviously, I'm going to paint florets over the top of this, and they will show the light and shadow a little more clearly, but it's good to have this sort of undertone. And I'm going to do the same with the leaves. The side of the leaf that does not have light on it will be darker. I mix French ultramarine blue and sap green. Sometimes I put in raw umber, it just depends how I feel basically, but any of those mixed together will give you a good shadow. I do the same with the highlight. Where the light catches the flower and the leaf, I'll mix with titanium white and add a lighter tone to those sides. And it's not really the end of things, you know, because you have to stand back from your painting and see where you need to adjust things. The light doesn't catch all parts, it doesn't go everywhere. It will touch a stem in one place, only part of a leaf, a tiny part of a flower, and you just need to put in those little bits of light, little tiny touches of shadow, which will give volume and dimension to your picture. And I don't call myself a realist, but it does make things a little more genuine, let's put it that way. That's a better word to use, I think. I think we're at step 5, and I'm using a round, quite a large round, and I'm going to put in my florets. So these will be the final strokes of the hydrangea. Each floret has 4 petals. At this stage I like to put the paint on very thickly. It gives a lot of texture to the painting. I just like that look. I know a lot of people don't, but you have to do the painting the way you like to see it. And in my case, I like a lot of paint. Just because the floret has 4 petals, you don't have to paint all 4. You can put in 2 or 3. And if the floret is facing away in a different direction, use a sideways stroke like that one, and that will give the impression of a floret without you being able to see every face of the petal. I want to say too, it's okay to overlap things. It looks better if a flower overlaps a leaf, or a leaf a flower. It adds something to it, a charm, and you'll have to stand back from your painting every now and then and decide what it is it needs. You don't see it all at once. You need to take those periods of time where you make yourself a cup of tea, sit down and just look at your painting, stare at it for a little while and decide what little touches it needs just to make it perfect. I didn't show my palettes, so you can't see, but I added a hint of alizarin crimson just to make a very pale pink, which I'm sort of dotting here and there, not every floret, not the entire floret, just a petal here and there to add an interesting effect to the flower. It just sort of makes it pop a little bit. I'm adding a little pale blue to the leaves, which may or may not stay. Sometimes I put things in and I think, does that look good? And I'll live with it for a few minutes and then, or even longer, and then decide I like it or not. And sometimes these things enhance, you can't always tell. Sometimes they don't do anything, and in which case I go back and paint over it. I'm using my liner brush, which is a bit bent. I have to get a new one, and some alizarin crimson, and I'm just running my brush along the stems and touching the alizarin crimson here and there. It is a dry brush, and it won't fill the stem completely, but it just leaves enough alizarin crimson on the stem and part of the leaves, the veins of the leaves, just to give that little added interest. French ultramarine blue also is another colour that I like to use for my shadow. It just has a little more depth than the raw umber, I find. Although raw umber is a wonderful neutral, I never underestimate the help that gives my paintings. But I like the red and the blue, and you might find other colours. I haven't really explored that far, but just adding these vivid pigments really sort of punches up the painting a lot, I find. For the center of the flower, I'm using a Q-tip and mixing a green and yellow in something pale. You don't want it to stand out too much, and you don't want to dot it into every single floret. You just choose a few and dot it here and there. That's enough. Otherwise your painting will be overwhelmed with dots, and you don't want that. I decided the foreground was a bit lacking, so I'm going to sort of put in some scrubby bits, some leaves, just make it look a little more interesting. I don't want to take away from the flowers, but I don't want big blank spots in my painting either. A fan brush is great for texture. I always have a couple of those. I've had them for years. They're bristle, and I find those the best. They're nice and stiff, and they give you a good texture result. I decided my painting didn't have enough contrast, and so I'm putting in more darks, and I'm probably put in more lights as well. But I think the darks will help define it a little better. Sorry about the back of my hand here. You can't see what I'm doing very well, but I decided the flowers needed to be darker on the shadow side, and I'm adding French ultramarine blue with a little titanium white in it, just to give it a little more depth of shadow. This highlight might look a little too pale, but the color does darken as it dries, so I'm going to give it a chance to see where it gets to, and if it's still too pale, then I'll change it. I decided it was too pale, so I'm adding a little pale green to it just to bring it down slightly. I'm using the primary yellow, alizarin crimson and a little titanium to make a pale orange, which I'm going to use for highlight on the stems. I think that also looks a little pale, but we'll see. It's best to give these things time to develop, and rather than rush things, although with acrylics you can change things at any time. They're really so easy to paint with. Okay, so I'm okay with that. I think it's quite a nice picture, and I've signed it. You can use an acrylic paint pen, as I did, to do that. It makes it so much easier than messing around with a little brush. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you're happy with the results if you painted along with me, and if you did, then you have a nice painting to gift to your loved ones, and you can make cards. I think I've done a video on that if you want to check it out, and I'll see you next time.